The broadcast. The year was 2347, and humanity had been part of the Interstellar Council for 63 years. They were the youngest species at the table, always reminded of their place. The elder races looked at humans the way a grown man looks at a child trying to sit with adults. They tolerated them. They smiled at them, but they never respected them. On a small world called Seven, far from Earth, 50,000 humans had built a home. The planet was cold and harsh, with winds that could cut through metal and storms that lasted for weeks. But humans were stubborn creatures. They built heated domes. They dug mines deep into the frozen ground. They raised children who had never seen Earth's blue sky but called themselves human all the same. The miners of Seven extracted rare minerals that powered ships across the galaxy. The teachers taught young ones about a home planet they might never visit. The engineers kept the life support systems running through the endless winters. They were ordinary people living ordinary lives, and they asked for nothing except to be left alone. But the hegemony did not want to leave them alone. They were an old species, one of the 12 elder races that controlled the council. They had scales the color of dried blood and eyes that showed no warmth. For centuries, they had claimed vast sections of space as their sacred territory, though they rarely used it. When humans settled Seven, they said nothing. For 20 years, they watched and waited. Then, when the colony had grown strong enough to matter but not strong enough to defend itself, they made their move. They brought a complaint before the Interstellar Council. The humans, they said, had violated sacred boundaries. The humans had insulted their ancient traditions. The humans must be removed. Earth's ambassador stood before the council and presented evidence. She showed maps proving the territory had been marked as unclaimed for 300 years. She showed records proving they had never once visited the system. She spoke with calm logic and clear facts. The council did not care about facts. The 12 elder species voted. Humanity's single vote meant nothing against their combined will. The motion passed 11-1, with one species choosing not to vote at all. The human colony was declared illegal. They were authorized to restore order as they saw fit. Ambassador requested time. She asked for 6 months to evacuate the civilians. She offered to pay any price, accept any terms, if they would just let her people leave safely. The representative laughed. It was a cold sound like stones grinding together. "The council has ruled," he said. "There is nothing more to discuss." What happened next was not war. War implies two sides fighting. This was something else. This was a message. The fleet arrived at Seven 3 days later. They did not attack immediately. Instead, they positioned their ships in orbit and activated every communication relay in the sector. They wanted witnesses. They wanted the whole galaxy to watch. The broadcast began at dawn, Seven time. Ships across 10,000 worlds received the signal. Billions of beings from hundreds of species sat before their screens as the commander addressed them. "Let all who watch understand," he said, his scaled face filling the screen. "The council's word is law. Those who defy the council will face the consequences. Today, humanity learns this lesson." The bombardment started moments later. The first strikes hit the defensive installations, though these were barely worth the name. Seven had mining equipment, not weapons. The second wave targeted the power stations, plunging half the colony into darkness. The third wave was different. The third wave hit the civilian domes. For 4 hours, the galaxy watched as 50,000 humans died. The cameras showed everything. Children running through collapsing corridors. Parents trying to shield their young with their own bodies. Elderly miners who had spent their lives in service to the galactic economy, burning in their beds. Some tried to flee in transport ships. They destroyed them in orbit, their wreckage falling back down like metal rain. Some tried to surrender, broadcasting on all frequencies that they gave up, that they would leave, that they wanted only to live. They did not acknowledge their signals. By the time the bombardment ended, nothing remained of the colony but smoke and ash, and 50,000 bodies frozen in the cold. The commander appeared on screen one final time. Behind him, his officers wore expressions of satisfaction. "Let this be a lesson," he said. "Humanity has no place among the stars except what we choose to give them. Remember this day. Remember what happens to those who forget their place." The broadcast ended. On Earth, in the great chamber of the United Terran Assembly, 200 representatives sat in absolute silence. Some wept openly, tears running down their faces. Others stared at the blank screen with expressions that had gone beyond grief into something else entirely. Something harder, something colder. Ambassador stood at the center of the chamber. She was 53 years old. She had spent her entire adult life in diplomatic service, believing that patience and reason could solve any problem. She had argued for peace when others called for strength. She had trusted that the Council would eventually see humanity as equals. Now she looked at the empty screen where the feed had shown burning children, and something inside her changed forever. Her hands did not shake. Her voice did not waver. When she spoke, every word was clear and precise, cutting through the silence like a blade. "Call them home." The assembly stirred. Someone asked what she meant. "Every human diplomat," she continued, "every human trader, every human scientist, worker, and traveler, every human ship in foreign space, call them home, all of them, now." The assembly began to move, slowly at first, then with growing purpose. Orders were drafted. Communications were sent. Across the galaxy, humans received the same message: return to Earth, leave everything behind, come home. No one asked why. Everyone understood. The elder species of the Council watched this response with amusement. They had expected anger. They had expected protests and demands and threats that humanity could never back up. Instead, they got silence and withdrawal. "Let them run home to hide," the representative told his colleagues. "Perhaps in another century they will learn proper respect." They laughed at this, the 12 elder species. They did not understand what they had done. They did not realize that they had made the greatest mistake in the history of their civilizations. They had given humanity a reason to become something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. And in the cold silence of space, that transformation had already begun. The withdrawal. The galaxy expected grief. They expected angry speeches and desperate protests. They expected humanity to beg for justice, to demand investigations, to file complaints that would disappear into endless committees. This was how junior species behaved. They complained, they cried, and eventually they accepted their place. The universe continued as it always had. But humanity did not complain. Humanity did not cry. Humanity simply left. Within 3 months, every human presence beyond the Sol system had vanished. Embassies were closed without ceremony. Trade agreements were dissolved with short, polite messages that gave no explanation. Research partnerships ended overnight, with human scientists packing their equipment and boarding transport ships without saying goodbye. The departure was organized and efficient. Humans who had lived on alien worlds for decades simply walked away from everything they had built. They left behind homes and businesses and friendships that had taken years to develop. They asked for nothing and explained nothing. The Council found this behavior strange but not concerning. "Let the children sulk," said the ambassador, a being of crystal and light who had never liked humans anyway. "They will return when they realize how much they need us." They were pleased. Their message had been received. Humanity understood their weakness now. In a few years, perhaps a decade, the humans would come crawling back, properly humble, ready to accept their true place in the galaxy. But as the months passed, the galaxy began to notice something odd. Problems appeared in unexpected places. Small problems at first, then larger ones. They operated the largest mining network in the galaxy. Their operations extracted rare elements from planets with atmospheres so toxic that most species died within minutes of exposure. The work was dangerous and unpleasant, and they certainly did not do it themselves. They had always hired humans for these jobs. Humans could survive in conditions that killed others. Humans were willing to work in places no sane being would go. Now there were no humans to hire. They tried to find replacements. They offered high wages to a dozen species. Some accepted the money, traveled to the mining sites, and died within their first week. Others took one look at the conditions and refused to leave their ships. Within 6 months, 17 mining operations had shut down. The rare elements they produced began to run short across the galaxy. The Syndicate faced a different problem. They controlled the largest shipping network in known space, moving goods between 10,000 worlds. Their routes included several unstable passages through twisted space that required constant adjustment and incredible precision. They had never bothered to learn these routes themselves. Why would they? Humans had always served as their navigators. Now the human navigators were gone. They tried to chart them with automated systems. 3 ships were lost in the first month, torn apart by spatial distortions their computers could not predict. They tried training other species to do the work. None could match human instincts, that strange ability to feel the currents of twisted space and adjust course by intuition alone. Shipping delays spread across the galaxy. Goods that once arrived in days now took weeks. Prices rose. Economies suffered. Medical research stations faced the worst crisis of all. The great laboratories of the Council had been working on cures for diseases that affected dozens of species. The work was slow and dangerous, requiring years of testing and experiments that often ended in failure. The elder species had provided the funding and the equipment. Humans had provided something else. They had provided themselves. Human volunteers had served as test subjects for experimental treatments. They had allowed alien doctors to inject them with untested compounds, to expose them to controlled doses of terrible diseases, to push their bodies to the limits of survival in the name of medical progress. They did this because humans believed in helping others, even others who looked down on them. Now there were no human volunteers. Research projects that had been years from completion simply stopped. Diseases that might have been cured continued to kill. Ambassador delivered only one official statement during this time. She appeared before the council chambers, her face calm and unreadable, and spoke for exactly 30 seconds. "Humanity requires time for reflection," she said. "We wish the council well in our absence." She did not answer questions. She did not make demands. She simply turned and walked away, and no human representative ever returned to those chambers. The elder species grew concerned. Some sent messages to Earth, requesting talks. These messages went unanswered. Others sent ships to the edge of human space, trying to observe what was happening in the Sol system. These ships found nothing unusual, just normal traffic moving between human worlds. But deep inside human territory, hidden from alien sensors, something extraordinary was taking place. The orbital shipyards of Mars, dormant for decades, glowed with constant activity. New designs were being tested, ships unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Council's observers had always dismissed human technology as primitive, barely adequate for basic space travel. They had never realized that humans had been holding back, developing secrets in quiet laboratories far from alien eyes. Deep space sensor networks went active across human territory. These networks had been built in secret over 50 years, hidden inside asteroids and buried on lifeless moons. Now they watched everything within 100 light-years of Sol, tracking every ship, every communication, every movement. In classified facilities on Earth and a dozen other human worlds, scientists worked on projects that had once been purely theoretical. Weapons systems that bent the laws of physics. shield generators that could stop anything short of a star going nova, engines that could cross the galaxy in hours instead of months. The massacre at 7 had been meant to break humanity. Instead, it had focused them. Every human in the Sol system understood what they were building and why. There were no disagreements about priorities. There were no arguments about funding. For the first time in their history, humanity was completely united in a single purpose. The Council continued to believe that humans were hiding in fear. They told each other that the young species had learned their lesson. They congratulated them on teaching the primitives their proper place. They did not understand that humanity was not hiding. Humanity was preparing. And when they were ready, the galaxy would learn a lesson of its own. The Reckoning. 3 years passed in silence. The galaxy slowly adjusted to the absence of humanity. New workers were found for the dangerous jobs. Alternative shipping routes were established. Medical research continued at a slower pace. The elder species told themselves that everything was fine, that they had never really needed humans anyway. The hegemony grew bolder during this time. They had proven their strength at 7, and now they saw no reason to hold back. Their fleets pushed into neutral space, claiming planets that belonged to no one. When smaller species protested, they reminded them of what had happened to the human colony. The protests stopped quickly after that. The Council watched this expansion with mild concern, but took no action. They were one of the 12 elder species. Their votes were needed for important decisions. No one wanted to anger them over a few worthless planets at the edge of known space. On the 3rd anniversary of the 7 massacre, a memorial service was held on Earth. Billions of humans gathered in cities across the planet, standing in silence as 50,000 names were read aloud. The ceremony was not broadcast to other species. This was a private moment, a human moment, and they shared it only with each other. Ambassador stood before the assembly as the last name was spoken. She was older now, lines of grief and determination carved deep into her face. When she spoke, her voice carried across a silent world. "We will never forget," she said, "and we will never forgive. Today we remember, tomorrow we act." The next morning, the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled departed from hidden shipyards throughout the Sol system. 2,000 ships moved in perfect formation, their courses plotted with precision that would have seemed impossible 3 years ago. They traveled through space that the Council believed no one could cross so quickly, using engines that should not have existed. They emerged from hyperspace at the edge of territory. The patrol ships detected them immediately. What they saw made no sense. The human vessels were massive, their designs angular and strange. Their surfaces seemed to shift and blur, confusing sensors in ways engineers could not explain. The ships moved together with perfect timing, thousands of vessels acting as one unified force. Admiral commanded the fleet from the bridge of the flagship, a ship named Remember. He was 60 years old, a career military officer who had spent his youth serving on the Council's peacekeeping missions. He had believed in cooperation once. He had trusted that the elder species would eventually accept humanity as equals. Then he had watched the broadcast from 7, and his faith had died with 50,000 of his people. Now he gave the order to broadcast on all frequencies. His voice reached every ship in the system, every station on every world, every communication relay in the sector. "This is Admiral of the United Terran Fleet," he said, his tone calm and steady. 3 years ago you murdered 50,000 of our people. You broadcast their deaths to teach us a lesson. You taught us well." He paused, letting the words sink in. "We learned that the galaxy respects nothing but strength. We learned that mercy is seen as weakness. We learned that the old order will never see us as equals, so we stopped asking for equality. We stopped hopping for acceptance. We built something new instead." The High Command scrambled to respond. Emergency orders went out to every military installation. Ships were recalled from patrol routes across their territory. Within hours, a massive fleet had assembled to face the human invaders. They outnumbered the humans 3-1. Their ships were larger, their weapons more powerful by every measure they understood. Their commanders felt confident. These were the same primitives they had slaughtered at 7. This would be no different. Admiral watched the enemy fleet take position. He felt no fear, no anger, no excitement. He felt only cold, patient purpose. "All ships," he said quietly, "begin." The battle lasted 11 minutes. Human weapons fired projectiles that moved faster than sensors could track. When shields activated, the projectiles simply passed through them, their technology operating on principles the elder species had never imagined. Human ships dodged enemy fire with impossible speed, their movements guided by computers that thought faster than any organic mind. They fought with courage. They were not cowards, but courage meant nothing against enemies who had spent 3 years preparing for this single moment. When it was over, 2/3 of the combat fleet had been destroyed. Thousands of vessels drifted dead in space, their crews killed by weapons they never even saw. The survivors retreated in chaos, their communication systems jammed, their chain of command shattered. Human losses, 17 ships. Admiral broadcast again. His voice was unchanged, as calm as if he were discussing the weather. "We have not come for conquest. We have not come for revenge. We have come for justice." He let those words echo across the system before continuing. "The individuals responsible for authorizing and executing the 7 massacre will be surrendered to human custody within 72 hours. Military commanders who ordered the attack, political leaders who approved it, bureaucrats who signed the documents, all of them, every single one." The High Command sent furious messages to the Council demanding assistance. The Council sent messages to Earth threatening consequences. Admiral ignored them all. "If these individuals are not surrendered within 72 hours, he continued, "we will collect them ourselves. There is nowhere in this galaxy they can hide. There is no force that can protect them. The choice is yours." He ended the broadcast and settled back in his chair to wait. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched in stunned silence. The elder species could not believe what they had witnessed. The junior species, the ones who had also been dismissed and humiliated, watched with something else entirely. They watched with hope. The trial. They surrendered their war criminals exactly 17 hours before the deadline. They had no choice. Their fleet was broken, their defenses shattered, and human ships now orbited there in silent warning. 47 individuals were transferred to human custody. There were admirals who had commanded the attack fleet. There were generals who had chosen the targets. There were politicians who had brought the complaint to the Council, knowing from the beginning that they intended massacre rather than justice. There were clerks who had signed the execution orders, stamping their approval on the deaths of 50,000 people. The Council demanded their return. They sent formal protests citing treaties that had existed for 1,000 years. They threatened economic sanctions, military action, complete isolation of human space. Earth's response came from Ambassador. She appeared before the Council chambers one final time, standing in the same place where she had begged for 6 months to evacuate her people 3 years ago. "You had 63 years to treat humanity as equals," she said. "We came to you with open hands, asking only for respect. We followed your rules. We honored your traditions. We trusted that your council represented justice." She paused, looking at each of the elder species representatives in turn. "You answered our trust with murder. You broadcast the deaths of our children to teach us submission. Your treaties protected the killers and ignored the victims. So no, we will not return your war criminals. Your treaties no longer apply to us. You abandoned their protections when you chose to make examples of our people." She walked out of the chamber without waiting for a response. It was the last time a human representative ever entered the council's halls. The trial was held on Earth, in the city of Geneva, in a courtroom built specifically for this purpose. The chamber was vast, capable of holding thousands of witnesses and observers. Its walls were lined with screens that would broadcast the proceedings to every corner of the galaxy. This was intentional. They had broadcast their massacre to teach the galaxy a lesson. Humanity would broadcast this trial to teach a different one. The 47 accused sat in a section of the courtroom designed to accommodate physiology. They were not mistreated. They were given proper food, clean quarters, and access to legal representation. Several refused human lawyers, declaring the entire proceeding illegitimate. Earth assigned them lawyers anyway, the best human legal minds available, with instructions to provide the strongest possible defense. Ambassador served as lead prosecutor. She had requested this role personally. The Assembly had granted it without debate. The trial lasted 4 months. Every session was broadcast live, just as the massacre had been broadcast live. Billions of beings across thousands of worlds watched as evidence was presented, witnesses, and arguments were made. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. They presented intercepted communications showing that they had planned the massacre months before bringing their complaint to the council. They showed internal documents where commanders discussed how to maximize the psychological impact of the killing, how to position cameras to capture the most dramatic footage. Survivors. 17 people had escaped, 7 in a mining shuttle that they had somehow missed. They described watching their families die on as they fled. They spoke of children asking why the sky was on fire, of elderly miners who had worked 50 years in service to the galactic economy, burning to death in their dormitories. Council records were presented proving that the vote to authorize military action had been manipulated. 3 species who might have voted against the measure had been threatened with trade sanctions. 2 others had been bribed with territorial concessions. The vote had never been legitimate. It had been theater designed to give legal cover to a planned atrocity. The defense argued jurisdiction. Earth had no authority to try citizens of the hegemony, they claimed. The Council's laws were the supreme legal framework of galactic civilization. What humanity was doing was no different from kidnapping. The defense argued precedent. Military actions against colony worlds had happened before. They were simply doing what elder species had always done. To punish them now would be to selectively enforce standards that had never existed. The defense argued necessity. The human colony had been expanding rapidly. If left unchecked, humans would eventually have dominated the entire sector. They had acted to prevent a greater threat to galactic stability. Ambassador delivered the closing statement for the prosecution. She stood before the court in simple clothes, without notes, speaking from memory. The defense asks you to consider jurisdiction, she said. But jurisdiction is a concept that protects citizens from unjust treatment by their own governments. These defendants are not being tried by their own government. They are being tried by the families of their victims. She paused, letting the words settle. The defense asks you to consider precedent. They say other species have done similar things. This is true, and those other species were wrong. The fact that injustice has happened before does not make it just. It simply means injustice was tolerated. We will tolerate it no longer. She turned to face the accused directly. The defense asks you to consider necessity. They say 50,000 people had to die because humans were growing too quickly, becoming too successful. Think about what this argument means. It means that achievement is a crime. It means that building something good earns death. It means that the galaxy operates by a single rule. The strong do what they wish, and the weak accept what they must. Her voice hardened. We reject this rule. We reject a galaxy where children can be burned alive because their parents worked too hard. We reject a system where success is punished and obedience is the only virtue. The defendants claim they were protecting galactic stability. We say they were protecting their own dominance, and they killed 50,000 innocents to do it. She faced the judges, a panel of senior human legal scholars selected for their wisdom and impartiality. You broadcast their deaths to teach us submission. Today, we broadcast this trial to teach something else. Every life has value, every crime has consequences, and humanity will never again allow murder to go unanswered. All 47 defendants were found guilty. Their sentences: life imprisonment on a human facility, where they would spend their remaining years maintaining a memorial garden for the victims of 7. It was justice, not vengeance. The distinction mattered. The galaxy watched, and the galaxy understood. The New Order. In the years that followed, the galaxy transformed in ways that no one had predicted. The Interstellar Council did not collapse. Humanity had no interest in destroying it. Destruction was easy. Destruction was what they had chosen. Humanity wanted something harder. They wanted to build something better. Earth proposed a new charter for the Council. The document was simple compared to the thousands of pages of treaties that had governed galactic civilization for. It contained only 3 core principles. First, every species would have equal representation regardless of how long they had traveled the stars. A species that had achieved yesterday would have the same vote as one that had ruled empires for 10,000 years. Second, binding humanitarian laws would protect all civilians in all conflicts. No more broadcasts of massacres. No more using terror as a teaching tool. Any species that violated these laws would face consequences from the entire galactic community. Third, genuine enforcement mechanisms would exist. The old council had made many rules but enforced none of them against the elder species. The new order would be different. A joint military force, with contributions from all member species, would exist to punish those who committed atrocities. The elder species resisted. They had ruled the galaxy for so long that they could not imagine any other way. They called humanity arrogant. They called the proposals naive. They warned that chaos would follow if the natural order was disrupted. Ambassador addressed these concerns at a gathering of all species, both council members and those who had never been allowed to join. "We do not want the galaxy to fear us," she said. "Fear breeds resentment, and resentment breeds conflict. Fear creates the conditions for another 7, another massacre, another cycle of violence. We want something far more difficult to achieve. We want respect." She looked around the chamber at beings of every shape and size, creatures of crystal and flesh and energy, species that breathed methane and species that lived in vacuum. Respect cannot be demanded, it must be earned. Humanity will earn it by treating every species the way we wish to be treated, by listening when others speak, by admitting when we are wrong, by building rather than destroying. Some of the elder species walked out. The representative never even attended, but others stayed. And as the months passed, more and more species added their voices to the call for change. The junior species were the first to embrace the new charter. They had suffered under the old order too. They had been dismissed and ignored, their concerns treated as unimportant, their people considered expendable. When humanity spoke of equality and justice, they heard their own hopes reflected back. They surprised everyone by being the first elder species to sign. Their representative stood before the assembly and admitted what no elder species had ever admitted publicly. "We benefited from the old system," she said, her crystal form shifting colors as she spoke. "We told ourselves that our dominance was natural, that we had earned our place through superiority, but we were lying to ourselves. We were simply older, nothing more." Other elder species followed slowly. Some never did. The hegemony refused any cooperation with humanity, retreating into isolation at the edge of their territory. They would remain there for centuries, bitter and alone, a reminder of what the old ways had cost. 10 years after the massacre, a memorial station opened at the site where the Seven Colony had stood. The structure was massive, visible from orbit, its surface inscribed with 50,000 names. At its center stood a garden, carefully maintained, where Earth plants grew beside species from 100 different worlds. Delegations from 30 species attended the dedication ceremony. Many had traveled great distances to be there. Some had opposed humanity once. They came now to show that they understood, that they had changed, that they wanted to be part of something new. Admiral, now retired from military service, gave the final remarks. His hair had turned white in the years since the battle, but his eyes remained sharp and clear. People have asked me many times why we did not simply destroy he said. We had the power. After what they did, few would have blamed us. Vengeance is simple. It feels good in the moment. It seems like justice. He paused, looking up at the stars that filled the viewport behind him. But vengeance would have made us what they accused us of being, primitives ruled by emotion, savages who only understood violence. We would have won the war and lost ourselves. We would have become the very thing we hated. He turned back to face the assembled delegates. Justice is harder. Justice requires patience. It requires rules applied fairly, even to our enemies. It requires treating others as we wish to be treated, even when they do not deserve it. We chose justice because we wanted to prove something, not to the galaxy, but to ourselves. His voice grew stronger. We proved that we are not what they said we were. We proved that strength and mercy can exist together. We proved that a species can be powerful without being cruel. The galaxy watches us now, not with fear, but with something that matters far more. They watch us with hope. He gestured toward the memorial names glowing softly on every surface. They thought killing 50,000 of us would break humanity. They thought we would retreat and submit and accept our place as servants to their empire. Instead, it woke us up. It forced us to become something new, something better. The old admiral smiled, the expression carrying both sadness and pride. And now we are going to make sure no species, human or otherwise, ever has to die for the crime of simply existing where the powerful do not want them. That is our promise to the 50,000. That is our gift to the future. That is why we remember. The ceremony ended. The delegates departed, but the memorial station remained, a permanent reminder of what had been lost and what had been built from the ashes. Across the galaxy, beings of every species looked up at unfamiliar stars and felt something they had not felt in a very long time. They felt that tomorrow might be better than today. They felt that the universe could change. They felt that maybe, just maybe, they were not alone. The measure of a civilization is not its power to destroy. It is its will to protect. Humanity had learned this lesson in the hardest possible way. Now they taught it to the stars.